Thank you so much for coming, everybody. We're very excited today to have this program for Santa Barbara City College students. We've got some really wonderful panelists put together by the graphic design and photography departments. And these wonderful individuals here, talented individuals, have come and taken time out of their very busy schedules. I've talked to a couple of them. They're under deadlines for projects and things like that. So we're very honored to have each one of you here today. I would love to share with you a little bit of background for each one, and then each one of them will get up and share some of their artwork up here as a little show. And then we'll have a little Q&A, and then if you students have any questions, we'll have some time for a Q&A from you. I'll be moderating questions in between the Q&A and when they do their presentations. So directly on my right here, we have Bruce Burkhardt. Bruce Jeffrey Burkhardt is a Santa Barbara-based photographer and artist. He has owned and operated a greeting card publishing company and a freelance photography business for decades. And some of you probably already know him because he's an adjunct professor here. To Bruce's right here, we have Chuck Place. Mr. Place is the owner of Chuck Place Photography. He's worked as an editorial photographer for over 35 years, serving a broad range of clients. He also is an adjunct professor here at Santa Barbara City College, and he has his bachelor's degree from the University of Miami in, of all things, marine biology. This is Chuck. We're delighted to have Chris Flannery here with us today. She's the director of art and design at Montecito magazine, and some of you should have the Montecito magazine at your place there. She generously brought some to look at. You can see her beautiful artwork there and the layout design that she's put together. She's the owner of Flannery Designs and Graphics, and is also on the side a watercolor artist. Thanks for coming, Chris. Chris is right. We have Somerset Walmsley. She's a senior graphic designer for UGG, print, packaging, and presentation design for Decker's brands, and she's an SBCC alum. And then last but not least, we have Warren Schultheis. He's principal product designer and design manager for Vox Media Incorporated. He's also a very important part of our graphic design and photography advisory committee. So thanks for coming, Warren. I would like to welcome Schultheis Sanders. He's up front here. He's our photography chair, faculty chair, and he's going to talk a little bit about the photography and graphic design programs. I also want to give a shout out to James Van Arsdale, our graphic design faculty member here. They were very instrumental in helping to put this together with the Career Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I am Schultheis Sanders. I'm the chair of the graphic design and photography department, where we like to pride ourselves in creating artists, who can make a living. Photography and graphic design are constantly changing and rapidly shifting, and it's important to us that we keep our ear to the street and that we also communicate as much as possible with professionals who are actually out in the field doing the work that hopefully one day you guys are going to be doing. So I'd like to welcome you all. I would like to thank all of our panelists for coming. If you are not currently taking a photography class or a graphic design class, you're free to do so. In the summer, spring, or the fall, you can contact either myself or you can contact Mr. James Van Arsdale, who runs the graphic design side, and we can talk to you about it. We both offer, both departments, photography and graphic design, both offer associate's degrees, certificates, and skills competency awards that you can actually take out into the workplace to show that you know what you're talking about. So feel free to get in contact with either myself or James, and I hope you all benefit from the immense wealth of knowledge we have at our disposal. So take advantage of it, because it doesn't happen very often.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Jana Mori with the Career Center, so I obviously have to give a plug for the Career Center while I'm here. and also for Val Uhrman, who's one of the career counselors in our department. If any of you are wondering, might I want to go into this field? Or I know I want to go into one of these fields, but how am I going to make a living? What can I do with this major? This is a perfect opportunity for you to drop into the Career Center. And the Career Center is drop-in. You don't have to make an appointment, so you're welcome to come whenever we're open. So this major or others, you know you can come and find us. Without further ado, I think we'll start off with Chuck here, and he will give us a little bit of background and information about his beautiful artwork.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chuck Place. I'm an editorial photographer, which means that I've worked primarily with magazines and book publishers. However, it's a thin, kind of a thin career financially if you're working in just that market. So I'm actually going to, as I go through these images, I'm going to talk about the different markets that an editorial photographer would actually be accessing, going really quite a ways beyond editorial. All right, so I started out working actually landscape work and then moved into travel pretty quickly. So things like this, a job in the Yucatan for National Geographic, worked for a lot of sailing magazines, just almost accidentally. And what's interesting about editorial is you tend to move around sideways in different areas. I've done a lot of food work, especially locally. And again, this is an area where you can work either for publications or for the actual restaurants. This is actually a publication shoot. So is this. The beauty of food photography, of course, is you get to eat the stuff when you're done. You know? Unlike a studio photographer, if you do studio food, you're working in a toxic waste dump and you don't eat anything because nothing's actually cooked. So the beauty of restaurant stuff is you actually get to eat this stuff when you're done. In the editorial field too, there's basically two sources for assignments. One, of course, are the publications, but one is yourself. And so I actually do spend a lot of time basically submitting proposals to magazines. This was actually one on oddball subject, saltwater fly fishing for a local lifestyle magazine. Same magazine, orchid collectors in the area. And the trick with this type of thing is to actually come up with an article that works for the publication but has a tie into something that's happening locally. In this case, Santa Barbara has one of the biggest orchid shows in the world, actually. And so the magazine actually tied it into releasing this article the exact same month that the orchid show happened. Sometimes the articles are based on, in this case, college towns. So again, you really never know what you're going to get as an assignment. It can be really diverse. And sometimes I've started shooting aerials with a drone. And this was actually a food assignment, shooting the restaurant at the Ballard Inn over in the valley. And the little guy standing down there on the right is actually Budi Ghazali. He's the owner of the inn and the chef. And so I consider this an aerial portrait, essentially. You have to kind of dig for the person, though. I've done 6 sole photographer books. This one is actually on the San Ynez Valley. Another one for a German publisher that basically it was on cuisine of the Santa Barbara area. And the beauty of this job was that actually a food studio in Stuttgart shot all the recipes, but I got to shoot all the sources of food. And so it became a really diverse shoot. The shoot list was actually about 6 pages long. It was farmers, fishermen, bakers, all kinds of things going on here. This is actually one of the more fun shoots that I've done. Did a book for the Smithsonian on historic sites and then realized part of it was in the Southwest. I realized that there was actually a gap in the books on Indian ruins. The most recent one was 15 years old. And so when you work in this area, you're always looking for holes in coverage and basically a way of promoting a book that's not out there yet. You're always looking for that hole that you think it's going to market well. In this case, this book sold extremely well. And when you shoot books, you've got a choice. You can work on a flat fee. The Smithsonian book was a flat fee for 3 months of shooting, or you can work on royalties. I went on royalties on this one, and this paid out for about 10 years. Actually paid quite well. Next book on the Southwest was on the cultural roots of the Southwest. This one hardly paid anything except in stock images because the publisher was behind paying bills for their printer, and the whole print run got sent to Europe and unloaded, basically. So you really never know. You've got to research the book publishers that you work with. And this particular one was actually very well respected, but I managed to step in right about the time they were failing and went out of business soon after. Again, a book put out by the Smithsonian on historic sites. 3 months I had to cover California, Oregon, and Washington. And I spent, at the time I had a camper, I spent all my time eating while I was driving. You had 3 or 4 locations every day for basically 3 months straight. It was really quite a race. Now, what you're going to find too in the editorial field, very often you end up with advertising jobs that are related to the subject of the magazines you're working for. So in this case, I'd been doing some work and supplying stock images to Popular Photography magazine. And when Tamron Lens brought out a new lens, they contacted the photo editor at the magazine because they were going to run ads in Popular Photography. And so there's very often a tie in there. And this got me a 3-day advertising shoot in Cape May, New Jersey, which is a place full of bed and breakfasts, and it's a really fascinating place. It's all Victorians. If you like shooting things like surfing, skateboarding, all the advertising in those magazines come from people who originally did the editorial in those magazines. And that's how you get into that side of the business. Now, since I started teaching, Bruce and I both were teachers at Brooks for about 12 years or so. And so getting out of town really wasn't an option. And so I started looking for more local clients. Originally, I worked almost all for national clients. And I made that decision originally because this is essentially, even though for a town it's big, but basically for a market, for a photographer, it's small. Santa Barbara is a small market. So I made sure all my clients, for the most part, were national magazines, national book publishers. Once I ended up being in the area all the time, then I had to start finding local ones. So shoots like this for the Paradise Cafe or Whitcraft Wineries. This is Drake Whitcraft, who is he's a winemaker, but he's also a really great musician. And so I kind of combined the two. And what you're going to find if you shoot for editorial, you get good at shooting a really wide range of subjects. And for me, that's the real beauty of it. It keeps it interesting. It keeps it fresh. For a while there, I was shooting all sailboats, and after a while, it just kind of got stale. And plus, they were sending me to Hawaii and Mexico, and the locations were a lot more interesting than the sailing. So very often, you're going to shift gears if you're going to be in the editorial field. And usually, as you get more involved in it, you're looking for higher paying areas that really can overlap with advertising. This type of stuff for websites, Almarosa Winery, again, another website shoot. Advertising shoot for Pismo Beach, the Chamber of Commerce, because they promote the stuff, the location is family-friendly beaches. As you can see, it gets fairly diverse. Here's the Humane Society. This guy just adopted this dog. You know, this is his newest best friend. You know, local gym, anything like this. And then, of course, back to the food. Now I'm shooting, in addition to other things, I'm shooting for Uber Eats, which is really fast, kind of quick and dirty shoots. But it's really actually fairly interesting. The only drawback is the first shot has to be an aerial like this, and so you're teetering on some little stepladder or chair looking down, and the whole time I've done about 6 of these, and each time I feel like I'm going to fall on the whole set, you know, and just, so the main thing with editorial is you need to be almost endlessly curious. That's really the bottom line with editorial. And it doesn't mean that you're always shooting for the editorial market. You can be shooting for advertising, for marketing on websites, so on and so forth, but editorial is a style. And if you shoot editorial, you've got to be really diverse. You've got to be good at architecture, food, people, activities, pretty much anything. Anything that somebody throws at you. You can't afford to say no to a job. And that's really the bottom line. But it's endlessly fascinating. Spent a month in the Yucatan for Geographic. I got stung by bees, I got swarmed by ticks, I got bitten by a fish, I got speared by a cone snail. My foot swelled up to about double its normal size, and I had to duct tape a flip-flop on and keep working. Photographed a Mayan ceremony. When you do that, you're a guest. You have to eat and drink everything, including the original chocolate drink, which is gray and runny and really bitter. and of course gave me the revenge. So I spent 3 out of the basically 4 weeks taking antibiotics, and when I came home I stopped, just about died, shed about 15 pounds, which I didn't really have to get rid of, but it was one of my favorite assignments, actually. You know. So that's really the way editorial works. Okay. Got questions? I think we've got Q&A at the very end.
Thank you, Chuck.
Hi, I'm Bruce. I'm Bruce Burkhardt, and I am also a local photographer. I moved here in 1984 from Switzerland, where I was living, and to go to Brooks Institute. And I love being around an environment of young people like this. It's my honor and my pleasure to be part of people's lives here in this part of their life when they're studying and dreaming and wanting to train themselves. So it's really an honor, I have to tell you to start with before. I've been a photographer now, working only as a photographer since I left Brooks Institute of Photography, and that's why I moved here to this town to go there, and graduated and started my business pretty much the day I graduated from Brooks, and have earned money and my living only from photography since that day that I graduated. So I can help you in that way. But things have changed a lot, and I've watched it change from that time, and I'm still a working photographer. As a matter of fact, I shot all morning for a client this morning, and then I went home and showered and came to talk to you fine folks. So I'm working today in Santa Barbara. My client base changes over the years. It fluctuates. Like Chuck said, you accept things. When you become good at one thing, other people notice your talents and invite you to become part of their projects, whether they be publishers, whether they be graphic designers, whether they be other photographers that need to add to their team for a certain job that they got. The joy of being a freelance artist, I'm going to call it, because I would highly recommend all of you get trained in different fields of art these days, is that every month, I wouldn't call it every day, but every month is different. There's a different project going on that you're involved in, which doesn't suit a lot of people. They like the routine of the sameness all the time in their life. It makes them feel comfortable. This occupation that you may or may not be interested in is forever changing. Every month I'm involved in something else. It could be shooting animals. It could be, right now I'm in architecture a lot in the last year and a half, because I got involved with developers, people that are building big resorts and hotels. And now other people are calling me because of the work I've done with that. So it just evolves and changes constantly, which I love. I'm not a person that likes to be stagnant and the same thing happening over and over again. But the one thing that is a constant is I get to teach. That I shut everything else down and I get to come and talk with young people who are in that mode of training themselves. So the pictures that I gave Sean to show you folks, my joy in life is, and I started out a young person wanting to be a National Geographic photographer, and I was a single man and I wanted to travel the world and experience things. And I happened to marry and find a woman that had the same sort of dream as I did, who didn't mind traveling the world, and we have done that. We've been married 33 years, and I married a woman that doesn't mind sleeping on the ground at night in the rain to be in the right place the next morning to do what we needed to do, and that's hard to find. It really is hard to find. So my dream was to shoot different editorial work, like Chuck was talking about, for my dream, of course, National Geographic. And I've got published in National Geographic. I've been published in many, many, many magazines because I got an agent. My first agent was Westlight that represented my work. And I would supply that agent with work. Of course, the agent does all the work, and I never had to stand and talk to anybody. I never had to shake anybody's hand. All I did was get to go photograph. They sold everything. They then sold to Corbis, and you might know the name Corbis Images. So I then became a Corbis photographer for a long period of time and supplied them, and they were my agent. And then Getty bought Corbis, and Corbis is out of business. So now I'm a Getty. Everybody knows Getty because it's pretty much the only agency left. So, and Chuck is also a Getty photographer, and it's good to have an agent, because most creatives are very, very creative and they're horrible business people. So giving out some sort of advice to any young person starting in our business, it would be to gather business savvy, to understand marketing, sales, to understand it. Not necessarily that all your life you're going to be a marketer. You are in a sense, but to understand what you're going to need, because just being creative isn't going to be enough. Anyway, I'll run through a few pictures. I didn't even know I was going to be showing these. I thought they were just going to go as we sat up here. But these are some of my editorial shots. This was the cover of Time magazine here when they were talking about the ice caps melting. I shot this up across northern Canada. I took a ship as a photographic expert from Iceland across to Greenland. I'm pointing at the world map here because I was looking at it earlier. The ship went across the ice cap to Greenland, around Greenland and over into the islands up in northern Canada. We shot a lot. So these are just some images that I shoot for stock and for publications. I grew up in Ohio. I'm fascinated with the Amish community. So I lived in Amish country and all around them. So I have done a book on the Amish. And whenever I travel back to visit in Ohio, I do a lot of Amish shooting and cover their lifestyle, their architecture, their religion, everything about them, because they fascinate me as a culture, and they're a shrinking culture. So you'll get interests like that no matter whether you get into graphics or photography or painting or whatever. You'll get these stimulating ideas and can't sleep at night wanting to complete them. I do a lot of composite work for magazines and people that are, well, I don't know what to call them, ideas. They stimulate. This was my rat race image, my idea of it in a single photograph. And basic landscape, which is a true joy of mine. Fine art, which Chantal is a fine art artist. And a young lady talked to me the other night. We were having a discussion here in the cafeteria, and she wants to, and I don't see her out here today, but she wants to make her living as a fine art artist. And I wholly support and love that we have artists in the world that they do. So, you know, if that's your dream, then you know, I'm your friend, and I will push and help you. And I love it too. But you're going to need to do some commercial work of some sort in the end as you do it. This was another project I did of tools and food, and I have a whole series. I fill a gallery with this idea. This is one image from it. I wanted to give you kind of an idea of what I do work-wise and how I see things. Like I said, I travel a lot. I lived in Switzerland, I lived in Japan, I lived in Australia. I've worked all over the world. My biggest client that I ever had was Aramco, which is the largest oil company in the world, based in Saudi Arabia. So I was back and forth to Saudi Arabia for years doing work with them, and had to produce a big World Expo project for them, which showed in Korea. So I'd be shooting in Saudi Arabia and have to fly to Korea to set up the show in the World Expo and stuff. So traveling will be another part of your life. You'll get jobs, like Chuck said, that take you within the United States, but also internationally. Don't say no. I think that's the smartest thing Chuck said, and that's what I'll say too. Opportunities will come. Think of ways to be able to take advantage of the opportunities rather than think of ways to shut them off and why you shouldn't do them, especially at a young age. But this is a wandering sadhu in India. I travel a lot to India and Asia just in general to photograph for projects and for my own well-being. Some architectural work. And this was a series I did because I'm sort of the anti-beauty, glamour photographer. I'm more travel and dirty, but my friends are all glamour photographers, so I spent months trying to do my version of what it was, and I did another gallery full of images of beauty, but I added elements of natural things to the images. So there you go. I think that's a series of, you could see a little bit of how I see things, and certainly I have millions of pictures, basically, what we could look at. So,
Thank you, Bruce.
yeah.
Chris, do you want to go next?
So I'm Chris Flannery. I have a completely different start from any of these guys. I went to UCSB as a science major in physiology and ergonomics, kinesiology. And after college, when I was looking for a job before I went to physical therapy school, because I wasn't ready to go right away, I discovered typography and graphic design. I walked into a design and typography studio in Santa Barbara, completely fell in love with the idea. I had no idea anyone ever did that before. It was completely new, and I was so excited about it. I went back home, didn't know about it, and I was telling my roommate about it. She says, well, why don't you write to them and see if you can work there for free and learn something about it? So that's what I did. The person I wrote to was Wendy Foster. At that time, she was a typography company, but now she's a dress company. And so she said yes. So for 9 months, I worked there 15 to 20 hours a week for free, learned about graphic design. And they suggested that I go to City College, which had one journalism class and one graphic design class at the time. Nothing like what they have now. And of course, there were no computers. So I did that. And from that class, I got a job working for a small magazine in Santa Barbara called This Week in Santa Barbara Magazine. It's no longer around. But from there, I learned more about designing forms. I sold printing. So I learned how to get myself out into the world and talk to different people and sell things, which, you know, I have my own business. And so that's what you have to do. You have to sell yourself. I don't have an agent like Bruce does, but I just need to go out there and talk to people. So after a few years of working in this field, I decided to try and start my own freelance business. And I tried a couple of times before it really worked. And it really worked when I found a client that was willing to work with me and stay with me if I went out on my own. So I had a base to start from. And within 3 weeks of starting my business, I was interviewed by the publisher of Montecito magazine, the magazine that you have there. In March of 1982, I became his art director. I'm still the art director for the magazine. So I balanced that with doing my own work. In that period, I worked for UCSB Housing and Residential Services for 27 years. Unfortunately, I didn't work on campus where I would get benefits. I worked off campus. If I'd known I was going to work there that long, I think that's something that people should pay attention to. Working for a company that you can get benefits and retirement and things like that. That's all different when you work for yourself. But on the other hand, I've had a business and an office at my home since 1982. And the publisher of the magazine has an office at his house. We don't have a communal magazine office. That's probably why we've been able to work together since 1982. We don't see each other every day. And we get together for meetings. We email and things. We had to learn, in 1985, we had to learn all the computer stuff, and everything changed a lot since we started on magazine stuff. And with UCSB too. So it's a lot more work, working for yourself and doing all your own billing and working with all the clients and communicating with them, because if you like for these guys, if they had an agent, I mean, Chuck probably dealt with most of the clients of his, but if you have an agent, you're not necessarily dealing with the clients. I am dealing directly with all of my clients. And as an art director for the magazine, I also sell advertising, I design ads, and I also design and work with all the artists that I want, decide what artists I want to put into the magazine, contact them, I have them paint things to illustrate stories. I find historical and current photos that I need for the magazine. And I go with the publisher to research every story that we do. So if we're doing a story about a garden or a house, we meet with those people, we introduce ourselves, we work with them directly. So for this whole process of the magazine that I work for, which is kind of unusual, I work on it from the beginning of each issue to the end. And I know every advertiser, I know every person that we write about, I know everything about it, which is kind of unusual for an art director. So my whole experience has been different, but I was so fascinated with this business when I first saw it. I just knew that I had to do it. And since then I've become a watercolor artist, but I think it just kind of shows that if you really love something that you find something that you love, then it's really worth checking out for yourself, because I've made it my career since 1982. Or since, well, I first started in 1976, but I've had my own business since 1982.
Somerset is going to be sharing some of her artwork with us as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Somerset. I'm senior graphic designer for the UGG brand at Decker's Brand, now Decker's Brands, formerly Decker's Outdoors, out there in Bonita. First time doing this, let me know if I'm like talking too quietly or if I'm rambling on too much, like throw peanuts at me or something. I've been at Decker's now for just at my 6 years, and I have some of the work that I've done here and then some work that I've done at some of my prior jobs as well for you to kind of get a feel for everything. These first couple examples are what we call sell-in books. The UGG brand is a retail and wholesale brand, so we sell both to like Nordstrom and Zappos on a wholesale business-to-business level, and also directly to consumers through our retail stores and UGG.com. And also the Decker store out in Google, go shop. For our business-to-business communication, we do these sell-in books twice a year. They've ranged anywhere from 100 pages to 200 pages. I'm working on one right now. It's really great. And this first couple of spreads was an overview of what the brand has been for the last couple of years. We've gone under a rebranding recently. So it is a little bit different looking, but you can kind of get a feel for what the brand has been and some of the products that we offer. This was actually the very first time we did this project, so we got to make the icons for it. Members on the team were doing the photo shoots for it. It's a lot of, kind of unlike some of the other speakers we've had, as an in-house designer, you're not on your own. You're fielding projects that kind of more brought directly to your door and work with a team of people to create all of them. And we're really fortunate to have a really great team at, over at the UGG brand. A couple other little examples here. In addition to doing printed pieces, I do a lot of packaging. As you guys have probably seen through social media, a lot of times celebrities will be posting like, hey, check out this great shoe I have or this cool product I have. And what you may not realize is PR departments from the various brands typically will send what is called a seeding, like a plant seed of gifted product, and that's often packaged in like a new special way. I know with the Kylie brand recently, they had a really cute one for Valentine's Day where they shipped out oversized candy hearts that you had to like break open, and that was the reveal of the product if anyone saw that. So similar to that idea, we had this Do Nothing campaign for our men's product a couple years ago. And this was a custom box. I worked directly with one of our local vendors here in Oxnard to create this box where the sleeve pulls off. And then inside, you had 2 flaps that you opened to reveal and had this other third piece that had messaging, and then you lifted off that black piece you see on the inside there, lift it off, and then you would have your customized product there. And for this particular seating, it was going to a lot of athletes and other celebrities, and we actually custom embroidered various motifs per each person. So like Tom Brady, we put his jersey number on like a football and sent that to him, and he posted it to social media. And it's really great to think, unlike, well, not unlike, similar to visual design, where you're thinking, journey through a website. With physical pieces, you also have to think about the journey through the experience as well. So layer 1, this is what you see when you first open the box when it arrives on your doorstep. And then journeying through this reveal to the messaging, the reveal to the product. So it's a really interesting way, and packaging is kind of like its own beast in that way. And there's lots of job opportunities between here and Ventura. I know there's some companies and agencies that focus on retail packaging and consumer packaged goods, foods and snacks and stuff like that are available out there. Continuing into some more packaging, this is the rebranding of our kind of what we call our main line, or like every shoe comes in a basic box. And for this, it was a really interesting project to work through and think about, again, that customer journey. What are they seeing and feeling about the brand? And we ended up doing new art on the box, coming up with this little, I don't know, the laser pointer, but in the corner there where you see the little pieces there are a booklet that came in a nice little sleeve that told you a bit more about the brand and explained that we offer more than just shoes, because a lot of people don't realize that UGG is a true lifestyle brand and has not only footwear but also apparel and home goods, and it was something we never had before. And at the same time, I was able to save the company $2 million a year by decreasing the amount of packaging that we had. So it's like you can make a really big impact on the business through the designs that you make. And then, so that was, sorry, this was the women's version. And then the men's, sorry, one more. And then the men's had an all black version, so it was a little bit more macho and kind of reiterated that. And there was this beautiful black foil that we had on the lid of the box that kind of upped the price point value and experience. Prior to working at Deckers, I worked at Yardi, which is also out in Goleta, a really great company. Not many people necessarily know about them. They make real estate and investment management software. I worked there 6 years ago. They've really grown their offering. They're a great team, graphic designers out there and photographers too to connect with. They're always hiring, so keep them in mind. I have a friend there, so send me your resume and maybe I can pass it on. This is one of the pieces that I did while there. We acquired this company called we acquired a company called Energy Billing Systems. And you can see kind of in the letterhead, the black logo in the upper corner was what the logo started as. And as part of this rebranding, we wanted to make it more youthful, more energetic. And what this company did is came to apartment complexes and serviced the utilities. And so those people who might be entering your apartment to make sure your meters are operating correctly and those sort of things, we had to like do name badge, some more promotional pieces, and kind of the traditional stationery set. And then way back early in my career, I still love this piece. I did this 2 years after graduating. At one of my first jobs, it was Jocko Beauty, and this was part of their, they're trying, Jocko Beauty, no longer a business, but if anyone's familiar with Pacifica Beauty, it's very similar an idea where it's lotions and body washes, lip glosses, stuff like that. And they're launching this new kind of collection of products that was more for like the boudoir. So they had shimmer body powder and fragrance candles and a few other pieces. And it was really fun to kind of take the existing architecture of their brand guidelines and come up with something new with that. So like this print didn't exist before, but the color palettes are kind of designated for each fragrance. And I think it's a design that even 15 years later still stands pretty well. And I'm sure I'll be talking more when we get to Q&A, but I just ran out of things to think about. Thank
you. Next graphic designer, last but not least, Warren Schultheis.
Hi, I'm Warren Schultheis. I am a principal designer for Fox Media Inc., which runs 8 online brands. I'll go through those in a minute. But I'm from Santa Barbara originally. I took a couple classes here, and like we were just talking about it earlier, I think it was in like 2002 or 2001. I got into design because I studied psychological anthropology and fine art in college, and I wanted to be an artist. And I also was really interested in anthro, and my art wound up being kind of about the anthropology, and it was very personal to me, and I was lucky enough to start selling paintings straight out of school, but it felt really icky to me, and I didn't like the interfacing with patrons or gallerists very much. That wasn't like, you know, there's a lot of talk about do what you love. That particular thing didn't work for me because the business side of doing what I loved was strange, you know, producing certificates of authenticity, haggling with people, having folks ask you to match their horrendous purple couch in their living room or whatever it might be. I just didn't, you know, I wanted to keep that personal. So I thought, well, I have an eye, so I feel like I could do design commercially, and that will pay for, my idea was that would pay for my private studio practice, which I still have. So I think it was I went to UC Santa Cruz. It was during then that I took a web design class, and I don't think I understood 90% of the material, but I very feebly made my first website in like 2001. And my painting professor, Frank, asked me to make him a website. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I cobbled this thing together and then moved back to Santa Barbara, followed a girl back here, and started trying to do websites for people because that was kind of a new thing for businesses at the time. And I took a few classes here. I tried my hand at like landscaping. I did trompe-l'oeil mural work. I hated that because it's backbreaking and you spend hours like painting on a ceiling and you develop like back problems really fast. So sitting on my butt in a chair doing like designy stuff sounded really good. I also had a habit of just waltzing into businesses and saying, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. And so that's how I got some of my first clients. I had part-time work at the Santa Barbara Independent as a production designer. It was one of my first jobs. And then I started my own business once I felt like I had enough potential clients to strike out on my own. So I had a little business called The Graphic Vendor, which I ran for roughly 10 years. And then at the same time, I was trying out this weird media journalism project. I had these lofty ambitions to do a startup that would allow people to engage each other civically in their communities, and then we'd scale that to every American city. And so we did it here in Santa Barbara. It failed. There were a lot of things that happened like Facebook and Instagram and Patch.com that kind of blew us out of the water. But that was kind of in tandem with the graphic design studio, and I was working like a lot of y'all, who are independent. You work really long hours and it's really stressful, and I even developed like medical conditions that required me to like not work as much. So at the end of all that, the business, running my own business was really gratifying. And at first I started out doing jobs that weren't that interesting. I had like an acupuncture clinic that I worked with. You do stuff for like garage door opener companies, and I never felt connected to that. But slowly over time, I was able to start taking work that I kind of synced with clients, like I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Shelter Social Club, but they run, or used to run, the Presidio Motel on State Street. They own the Agave Inn. There's one up in Rancho, in Ojai, called the Ojai Rancho. And so I did all their branding, all of their websites, stationery, business cards. And that was like, they were like my clients. They were really, they shared a sensibility with me. And so slowly I developed, I guess, a little bit of a reputation for a certain style, and folks started coming to me. And it was right kind of at the pinnacle of that when business started getting easy, when I randomly took a job for what is now Vox Media, but was then a little startup called SB Nation, which stands for Sports Blogs. And I thought, like, they have funding. I'm going to try this out for like a year, see what happens. I was doing a lot of like regional sports blog logos, if you can even call them that at the time. The art direction was kind of funny, and they were like cheesy news anchor graphics that you might see on the local news. And then Vox started becoming more of a thing, and I threw a bunch of images at James, and I think this is kind of like curated by James, so I'm just going to... we have 8 online brands. One of them is Polygon.com, and then for each of those brands, there are often sub-brands. So Polygon.com, I helped design, and it's a gaming and culture website. You know, we did a ton of research. Lots of gaming sites, if you're familiar with gaming, you know, they're often like black and green, and I thought it would be really interesting to choose pink because gaming culture tends to be kind of macho. Someone else mentioned macho earlier. And so we worked on these pink tones and gray, and you know, we wanted to develop a very inclusive, you know, brand culture. And so Human Angle was one of their TV series that I did some branding for. This was about 4 years ago. Like I said, I designed Polygon.com. This was one of the video bumpers that we launched with that would appear before and sometimes after some of our video reviews. And then for a long time, I art directed editorial features. So we had this, some of you may remember a couple years ago, the hotness was like these big immersive, like New York Times style features where, you know, as you scrolled, parallax would happen and, you know, snow would fall or, you know, things would animate. And we were doing a lot of that kind of stuff. This is I can't even pronounce this anymore. Anamanaguchi, I think is the name of the game studio. A couple years later, I was on the team that helped rebrand Recode, which, if you're not familiar with Recode, it's a tech journalism site that some people kind of think of them as like the 60 Minutes of tech journalism. So you'll see them parodied on like Silicon Valley, and they're very hard on folks like Mark Zuckerberg. So he's been through some sweaty interviews with them, like he was just yesterday and today. So this was one of the program booklets that we made, and they interview folks like Richard Branson or what's his name, Bezos, Jeff Bezos. Oh. Sorry, I'm
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon.com. So you know, tech folks. This was just a kind of early sketch that we were playing with to you know, play with booklet design ideas. And of course, we designed like, you know, conference backdrops, and that's Walt Mossberg, who recently retired, interviewing Jeff Bezos on the stage. So it's really weird, you know, coming from Santa Barbara, having had my own small studio, to all of a sudden be designing stuff that, you know, millions of people are seeing. I mentioned Shelter Social Club earlier. These are just a few images from back before the Vox days. The Hamlet is a small motel up in Solvang. The Agave Inn is on Upper State. So what's not pictured here is all the other brand stuff that we developed for them. Is anybody familiar with TheVerge.com? Yeah. We just recently rebranded The Verge at Vox. And so this was one of, again, a video bumper that I was playing around with, and some tweaks that we made to the existing logo, which was originally designed by Code and Theory, which is a fantastic design studio based out of New York. This was a mood board. If you're not familiar with mood boards, it's something we use to establish like a brand feel without being, you know, expressly for any purpose. Like there are no navigation buttons here, or you know, there's no evidence that it's you know, for anything. This was another mood board that I did for The Verge early on, before we got very far. I also led design on Vox.com. Vox.com is a general news site that we publish. And I should back up and say, like, Vox Media, which runs all these brands, we are a media company, so we publish, you know, journalists and host blogs and all of that kind of stuff, but we're also a tech company. We built the platform that all those publishers use to produce their stuff. So, you know, our program essentially handles what you might see in WordPress or other content management systems. So we built that. We built the ad serving system. We built an ad network. So it's kind of all in-house. But this is some of the Vox.com branding. The thing on the left is just a placeholder. So when like the editorial team didn't have an image, they used that. On the right was a spin-off sub-brand called Vox Conversations. That was like an unconference where Ezra Klein, who was at the time our editor-in-chief, engaged a lot of like, quote-unquote thought leaders in DC and wanted to see if they could talk about some of the world's more pressing problems in an intimate setting. And so we did a lot of signs and backdrops. And I think, is this it? Yeah. So, and I see James dropped in. Yeah, that's awesome.
I wanted to cover that too.
Yeah, so like I said, I still do art. I still do art untethered to anything. Like I get to do what I want, which is really freeing. And I think my art was able to evolve a little bit separate from all the design work. And so, I paint and I make artwork in my studio. But I also curate a little bit. I've been doing that for the last 7-8 years. And this is a shot from one of the shows that I curated down in Los Angeles at a little gallery we run called TSA, or Tiger Strikes Asteroid, Los Angeles. And it's an artist-run space. It's really fun. We get to each take a turn either showing or curating. And so this show was about, I was fascinated, still am fascinated by the design language of RVs. You see those like brown and maroon swooshes. And it's never made any sense to me other than like somehow vaguely saying like, freedom, outdoorsiness, and it's stayed the same for the last 30, 40 years. And so I thought if I prompted the artists on this topic, like, what do you think about this? What are your, interpretations of this? Something interesting might come out, and I think some really interesting stuff happened. This little pyramid in the foreground is a piece by Katie McCarthy, who, it's a USB drive with kind of more colorful, like, RV swooshes painted onto it. And a few other artists in the back. I think that's David Kilpatrick with the black and white piece, Ben Sanders and Kat Trujano. So it's really like, that's my passion stuff. I go down to LA and pretend I'm a real artist. But it is like, I think in my life, it's really worked out to have that delineation. I love design, and I've learned a lot of good things for art from design and vice versa, but I really like that they're separate. I don't always encourage people to do what they love. Sometimes that's too sacred. And so for me, this delineation has really worked out. I guess we'll get to more later, and I think that's it.
And at this time, I'd like to ask some questions and have each panelist, I'm just going to have you go down and answer some questions, all the same question, and I might have some specific ones for you. Right now, the first question is, what do you like most and what do you like least about your work? And we'll start with you.
What I like most about my work is the diversity, the difference of each project. What I don't like about it, honestly, I'm still doing it. I can't answer that.
That's a great answer. How many people are willing to say that?
I'm sorry.
What about you, Jack?
For me, I think the real strength is all the adventure. Basically, even local jobs tend to be an adventure because the subject is different every single time. The part I don't like is kind of the tyranny of marketing, because marketing, once you start it, you can't stop it. If you do, you're out of business. So you have to, social media, website, blog, all of this stuff, most of your time is spent marketing if you're a freelancer, 90%, 80% at least. And then finally you get to do what you really like to do. So I wouldn't mind cutting that down some. Some of it's interesting, but not as interesting as shooting.
Well, I like the diversity of what I do because of working with a lot of different people and clients and meeting them. So, plus having some time just working by myself in my office and my studio. But I'd say the part I don't like, since I work for myself, is taking care of all the paperwork and the billing and all of that boring stuff. So you really need to learn some business stuff before you start your business, which is something that a lot of schools don't teach. A friend of mine from Santa Barbara, who's an attorney, went to the state and asked them to include business classes in all law schools. And I think he got that passed, at least in California, because all these attorneys would come out and not have a clue how to start a business, and most of them were working for themselves. So taking some business classes is always worth doing. Yeah.
I love being paid to do something creative and fun that I enjoy doing. But no, in all honesty, it's really great to be able to spend your day being creative and working with a team of people where you can do that. The downside is, as the designer, you're the end output. You're usually the final person to touch a project. So everything's deadline driven. Things that get delayed earlier in the process sometimes then end up compressing your timeline or impacting your ability to have some of those more creative moments. But you know, through time and experience, learn a way to balance it and predict when those times are going to happen.
Oh, that's so true. I really love, about design, I love the thinking and the problem solving. For me, that's exhilarating. I love collaborating with other people. I didn't show much of it, but like we do a lot of wireframes and UX design and collaborating with engineers to build things that are new and solve some problem that we're working on, and that's really fun. What I really dislike, I think, and this goes back to like my time at the Indie, I don't like being in a production environment where you're just doing the same thing over and over, and you're kind of getting a set of instructions, you read from the instructions, you execute on them, and then ship a thing that, you know, maybe you didn't have much creative control over. So I've never liked production work, and I've done my best to steer clear of that stuff.
Thank you. So what are some traits that are really important for individuals to have in this type of work? We've heard curious, flexible, maybe you even have to die for your job. What are some traits that you would recommend? And we'll start with you on this end of the table. We'll go back to you.
Everything inside.
Yeah, I'll definitely underscore the curiosity thing. That's helped me. You know, from an early stage, being curious about anthropology and things that are outside of design has really helped me. It's helped me have like a slightly different perspective than all of my other design colleagues who, or not all of them, but you know, I have a slightly unique vantage point, and that's been really helpful. And it's even kind of unintentionally added to like whatever my personal brand is, where, you know, oh, Warren has this sort of strange humanistic angle on things, and that's helped out. And then someone earlier said saying yes is really helpful, and sometimes, and not to be contrarian, but also saying no to the right things at times. Saying no to some, you know, sometimes you get a spidey sense once you've been in business for a long time, and you get the sense that this client is going to be really difficult to work with, and you adjust accordingly.
I think as you were talking about problem solving, for me, design is all about creative problem solving. You're asked to deliver this, and you have to deliver, you know, find out what is the best solution to deliver that, and also package it in a beautiful way. I think being flexible, working with, you know, you can't sit around and wait for inspiration to strike. When you're being paid to do it, it doesn't matter if, you know, you get inspired on Sunday mornings or something during your nature walk. You got to be able to deliver your stuff on Friday if it's due on Friday. So you got to be kind of self-disciplined in that way, and it can take time to figure out, you know, everyone's got their own path to inspiration, but knowing what that is and making sure you have time for that, because otherwise, as you were saying, you end up in the production mode of, I'm going to make this thing to make this thing, and it's going to be a whole lot like it was last time, but different color and a different, you know, different words.
Yeah, I think it's important to know yourself, what you can handle, especially if you work for yourself, and to communicate well with your clients and listen to your clients. And be sure that your own ego, maybe, of the designs that you want to produce for someone that you might think are great and they don't like, that you have to be willing to be, like she says, flexible in changing colors and maybe even making something that you don't think looks that great, but that's what the client wants. It's really important to listen to your clients, and it's easier if you're working directly with the person that you're designing it for. You don't always get to do that, but if you can talk to the person that's going to ultimately be using the product, sometimes that works a lot better than talking to the boss of that person. So it's just a matter of communicating, being your own salesman, and doing it well, I think. So.
You know, I've always liked the Tina Fey quote, say yes and figure it out later. But there's areas, like Bruce, I don't care, obviously I don't care one way or another about fashion or anything. And so part of your job is actually building a network, and part of my network is photographers that I recommend for jobs that I'm just not qualified for. If it's really commercial architecture, something like that, I don't care that much about architecture, you know. So if it's a quick shot of a building or something, I can do that for a realtor, but otherwise I'm going to send it to people that I know are going to do a really good job. And that actually promotes you. That promotes your business. If you hook up a client with somebody who does the job really well, you know, you're the hero in the whole thing. So sometimes it's a good idea to actually say no, and know what you are good at, what you're not good at, and usually what you're not good at is things you're not really interested in.
And I ditto all of them in the things, of course. To young people, I like to say that punctuality, politeness, respect, all basics of what we as humans should practice anyway in all times. But when you are in a position to be marketing yourself, not only your product and your creativity, but you are really selling you and your personality, because most all of us work as a team. Even though we are independent, we attach ourselves to a project which is always some sort of team. And teams like to get along and have fun and laugh and have it be a joyful experience. So a man from Kodak, Ken Lasseter, I remember when I was young, most of your ages, and I was trying to break in, and I was trying to get sponsorship so that I could travel out in the world and have Kodak pay for it. And I was in a meeting and someone was late for it, and he said to me, you know, the person that's late for this meeting assumes that their time is more important than our time. And I never forgot that. I was young like you, and I've always lived from that moment on to never be late for anything. And I notice sometimes young people in teaching at Brooks and coming here have a little laissez-faire about sauntering in late and things. So I would highly recommend that you work on that you make sure that punctuality is part of your everyday lifestyle. It will benefit you in the end.
So I'm going to have, that was beautiful, thank you so much. I have one more question for these folks, and then after that we'll open it up to Q&A to all of you. And my question is, if you had to do your education or career over again in a different way, how might you have done things differently, if at all? You want to start out, Bruce?
Yeah, I would have married a very wealthy woman. Really, really rich. I think that would have been one. But aside from that, I married for love. How would I have done it different? Once again, I feel I don't have any regrets. I've had a really fun, good ride in what I did. I met the right people along the way. Right now, I feel if I was starting in what I do, I would expand my horizons in the tools I use. More motion picture, like we're looking at here, is more being asked for in my industry than still stuff. So combining that, talking to a young person that might want to change something, looking back, I would combine the world of motion with the world of still in imagery. So.
Well, you know, this sounds like, you know, you got your future planned out. You're going to go through these steps. My major was marine biology in college. And when I graduated, my parents gave me a used camera system, and I was supposed to get an underwater housing for it. And it took me about 15 years and a bunch of sailing work to actually get around to buying a housing for it. the camera just sort of took on a life of its own. It was sort of like Frankenstein's monster. And I've never been able to do anything since. So there wasn't any planning. I don't know that I could plan my future differently, because as far as I could tell, I didn't have any say in it anyway. It just bloomed.
Yeah, I think mine just kind of happened too. So, but I think that nowadays, if I were someone coming out of college, I would really think about, which I touched on when I talked earlier, about maybe working for a company, having some benefits, having some money that you could save and things like that. And which is something, you know, when I was growing up, and I mean, no one ever talked to me about those things. I didn't even really, wasn't aware that all of those things were available to almost anybody. But, you know, all of that is worth exploring and trying to figure out what the best way is, what suits you best, you know, whether it's working for a big company, working for yourself. You know, there's such a variety of things to do, so, yeah. And what, like Bruce says, be flexible to add things on and be willing to challenge yourself, and that's really important too.
I'd say take this opportunity to experiment and network, as he was talking to earlier. You know, this is a time in your life where you are the most flexible you will ever be. You can choose what areas of focus you want to look into and try in a really quick and easy way. You take the classes that give you the overview of, we do some photography, we do some video, we do audio, we do the mixing of those outputs instead of being the one behind the camera. We do printed pieces, we do digital pieces. Explore everything, because you might stumble into something you didn't realize you're really interested in. I actually wanted to be a 3D animator when I was a kid, before Toy Story came out. And now I do print. That's my primary focus. And when I was here at City College, I took all the multimedia classes, Flash, Dreamweaver, Director, not even a program anymore. So life will go in ways you don't expect it to, and that is fine. Be okay with that. And then network. You're here, you're making all these friends. They're going to, you know, move on to different places across the city, across the state, across the country, across the world even. And you never know what relationship you make today might end up giving you the avenue to an opportunity a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Who knows? Give it a try. I need to do more of it.
To fit it into your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Things that I regret or would do differently, the two things that jumped to mind were, I think even when I was like in my teens, I played guitar, and I remember like thinking, oh, like these other kids are so much better than I am. You know, and I played for fun, but I never thought like, oh, you can just keep going and you're still young. And I think the whole like, it's too late for me to get good at whatever it is, thinking didn't do me any favors. So I would recommend just, you know, if something's interesting, try it. And you know, it's never too late. And then I think I also wasted a lot of time, you know, wondering like what the right way to do something was. And you know, and despite learning the lesson over and over again and having it even work out when I ignore some convention or don't even know it to begin with, often those things yield more interesting results. And you know, there was a time when we prototyped an entire website with InDesign, which wasn't done, and really, you know, but it was like the most flexible tool. And then a couple months later, you know, other design studios published these long think pieces on why InDesign was good for that kind of thing. But it was helpful for our team to have already experimented with that, and you know, so going against the grain in a lighthearted and open-minded way is nice, as long as you're not like. I agree with, I can't remember who said the thing about ego, but ego doesn't really get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's open it up to any of you who have questions. You can ask a specific person or the panel in general. Did you have one?
I was curious, like, how much of your time is spent in front of an actual computer, you and the computer?
Who would like to answer?
I'll say 35 hours a week, give or take. 5 of those hours being meetings with other people, so I can then go back to my computer and do it. Half that time, I mean, and then of that time, say a third of us probably spent more on emailing and kind of written communication than outright designing. There's a lot of that, scheduling, project planning, all that good stuff.
Great.
For myself, completely different than that because I work for myself. So when I have a deadline, like for the magazine, I'm working 7 days a week and I'm working 12 to 15 hours a day for about 6 to 8 weeks to produce the magazine and do everything I need to do. And about 4 weeks of that is pretty much just on the computer. Other times I'm maybe interfacing with ad clients or something, but there's a period when I'm working solidly on the computer, so I have to be really aware to get up, walk around, otherwise, you'll not be able to keep working that many hours.
Oh, and then you said, how often is your publication printed?
It comes out twice a year.
Okay.
But because I do a wide variety of things, I'm working on it for a long period of time, yeah.
As a photographer, there's really, it's sort of like undertow, let's say. You're on the surface and you're doing jobs and you're processing those jobs. But underneath, you've always got that continual feed into marketing that you always have to do. And so basically, that fills in a certain amount of time, and then your assignments sort of bounce up and down in there and eat up computer time. So some days, I'm on the computer 8 or 10 hours. Other days, I don't even turn it on, although that's extremely rare because of email, actually. I've constantly got to be on top of email. So it just depends on what you've got going on. And again, how strong a feed you've got going with social media, blogs, websites, so on and so forth. That's almost a scheduled kind of thing that you've got to keep up with.
It changes for a photographer. Graphic artists and designers, I'm sure, spend more time on a computer because that's where their tools all are. Mine's in a camera and the computer, so it's half and half. Half and half. It depends on if I'm doing compositing for someone, then obviously a lot more computer time because I need to take the pictures and then composite, spend the time. Or if it's just deliver a photograph of a product, it's take the picture, and the making of the picture will take longer than the post-production of the picture. So it changes. There's nothing I can say is the same.
Warren, would you like to?
Sure. Yeah, very similarly, around 35 hours on a typical week. I also work remotely. Our office is in New York and DC. I think if I wasn't, though, depends on what you're doing. Because when I'm in principal designer role, I'm at it all the time. When you're managing folks a little bit more. As a design manager, there are more meetings. And if I was on site, then it would probably be closer to half the time. So maybe 20 hours a week, in front of the machine.
What?
Other questions? Yeah.
So I was wondering, how do you find your clients and how do they find you?
Finding clients.
Network.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, I just going out and talking to people at, social events. And, over time, when I was independent, word of mouth was like it. I would put, a little bit of money into AdSense or Google or whatever, and that very rarely produced anything. It was always word of mouth.
Friend of a friend.
Yeah.
When you're working with national magazines, there's a process. The first one is you get an email list and you send samples of your work every month. And you have a schedule and you stick with that. Like I mentioned earlier, if you stop that, suddenly, as far as your clients are concerned, you're going out of business. All right? So that's the starting point. Then you try to arrange meetings with different clients. And I know photographers who break this down. Let's say you're based in Santa Barbara. They'll spend, say, 1 day a month trying to find clients in the immediate area. They'll spend 2 days a month going to San Francisco or Los Angeles. And each, say, 6 months, they'll spend a few days in New York, which is really for editorial, is the mother load. And they'll arrange meetings because typically people hire people that they've met and know that they can enjoy working with. So sometimes that marketing gets to be pretty involved.
And as students, I would highly recommend, I remember my Brooks days when I was a student, I would recommend that you definitely build something while you're in school. Build a collection of works that you've done. They're not going to be maybe what you're going to compete against the professionals out there in the market, but have something to show. Aside from just your assignment works that you're getting as projects, give yourself self-assignments. Get together with other people who you find like-minded and motivated, and work with them as teams and put together packages and pieces and things that when you do go out to market yourself, that you have something to show rather than a diploma, which is a good thing. But you also, when I went through Brooks, I entered every photo contest. It didn't matter if it was the county fair, the state fair, the local camera club, entered them all so that I could get honorable mentions, maybe a second place. And that, as you start building a resume, you have something. Who are you when you're showing yourself? What do you have? You know, everybody's nice. Everybody went to school. Everybody dresses well, has a personal grooming. But who are you and what do you have? So that, I would recommend as students that you gather something to present.
We had a question, another one back here.
Yeah, was there a moment at the beginning of your career or your studies in which really this encouraging moment, maybe that you were probably not stopping but slowing down your process of getting out there and doing what you love? And if you did, how did you overcome that? Yeah.
I can take that one easy.
Okay.
Yeah, usually about once a year that hits me. You know, I like to say editorial is one of the lower paying areas in photography. For myself, I really, I have trouble functioning if I'm not shooting. If I go for a couple weeks without shooting something, it's sort of like withdrawals. I get grumpy. My wife doesn't want to talk to me anymore, you know, that type of thing. I really don't have any choice. And most of the people that have been in their jobs long term, that's really what it is. When you think about, you know, I want to go into photography or graphic design, you have to have a need rather than want. That's a, you know, it's a fine kind of line between the two. But if you don't have that need, you won't put up with the downtimes, which you'll run into no matter how good you are and how successful you are. There's always going to be low points. All you need is a recession, and suddenly you don't have any work for a while anyway. You know, so there's got to be that deep-seated need to create this work continuously, even if you don't have a client. As Bruce said, very often in my area, it works extremely well. If I don't have a client and I've got some free time, I go out and do basically my own assignment, and then I pitch those to different publications. And very often those assignments never sell, but sometimes they like the work, and I'll get a call back shooting something totally unrelated usually. But they like the style and they like the idea of somebody being proactive. So the downtime, you can really make use of it, but there's always going to be that little thing in the back of your head saying, you know, I'm just not any good at this. You know, I've been doing it for 30 years, but, you know, I don't have a job tomorrow. What's going on? That's just part of life. That's just the way it works. If you go into any creative medium, I don't think you can meet an actor or a musician, anybody else out there that doesn't have that pop up in their head really quite often.
I think we need to close because it's 5 o'clock. If you have questions
Oh,
for
that
some
went
of
fast.
our panelists here, if you want to stay afterwards, you're welcome to come forward. But right now, let's give them a wonderful time.